we ended up in this area called the Golden Triangle up in Northern California, where most of the weed growing was done, which there's actually a documentary series on Netflix about this called Murder Mountain, which is literally where I lived. About 50 miles deeper and more remote. So if you watch the documentary and you see the stories around corrupt police, around people running around with machine guns in the wilderness to protect their crops, around the proliferation of bad characters that came into the area, so the murderers, the serial killers, the human trafficking, those are the stories in my book that I experienced all of those personally.
Duffin, thanks for joining me on the podcast today.
Yeah, looking forward to the conversation.
I got to say, it's not expected or often that I get somebody reaching out that has world records in the realm of strength. And one thing it definitely inspired me to do is at least one extra set in my workout this morning.
Well, I like that. That's great. I obviously don't expect people that listen to me or follow me to chase the things that I did, but to have the influence on people to try to push themselves a little bit more in some of those avenues in life. And that's not just the gym. Like, it's resilience in all fashions. In fact, you were just asking me before we started about my backstory, and I was showing you my autobiography. There's literally like 3 pages around lifting in my autobiography, which is surprising for most people.
Yeah, for sure. So you mentioned the word resilience. Let me ask you, like, what does that word mean to you?
It means a lot to me. So resilience is the essence of life, if we really get, philosophical. But even it's not even an ethereal sense that it really is. Like, if you do something simple like break your arm, right, and you put a cast on there, what happens? Well, yeah, we've sent a stimulus, and there's both in repair and growth of the bone, but the muscle tissue, the tendons, everything immediately starts this process of atrophy. Like, you take your cast off, 3 months later, your arm's tiny, and that happens anywhere. That crack up on this rock, face way up in, on a mountaintop, there's a tree kind of trying to grow out of that thing. Like, the struggle against resistance, like, is the essence of life. There's a pretty telling analogy around the biodomes and the trees in that, because they took decades trying to figure out why the trees would grow to a certain height and fall over. Like, they were healthy trees, and you reach a certain height and just be falling over. And they couldn't figure out for a long time, and found out, it's because they're in the biodome, like it itself reducing the fact that there's no wind buffeting against these trees, telling those roots to grow deeper and stronger.
Interesting.
There's no weather hitting the bark. There's no, to take the ethereal, it is the reality that if we don't have something that forces us to get a little stronger, that we don't. I mean, that is life in itself. And that comes in all fashions. And that really got hammered into me during my childhood. And I want to provide some context to that, because I don't want to say, like, hey, if you've been through horrible trauma, like, that should be nothing, you should be stronger. Like, I understand the residual nature and damage that can be done when the stressor's beyond the level of what you can grow from. And that really is my story that I share. So I had a very interesting upbringing where I grew up literally homeless in the wilderness of Northern California.
Wait, what? Say it again? Homeless in the wilderness?
Yes, indeed.
Say more.
So my parents did not want to be part of traditional society, and that started out, a little bit of just being hippie, living commune style, in some, home with another family up in the mountains, no running water, electricity, getting snowed and stuck in during the winter. And but quickly evolved into, well, got to make ends meet and figure things out. And they were heavy into, drug use themselves. And so got into the drug trade, and we ended up in this area called the Golden Triangle up in Northern California, where most of the weed growing was done, which there's actually a documentary series on Netflix about this called Murder Mountain, which is literally where I lived. About 50 miles deeper and more remote. So if you watch the documentary and you see the stories around corrupt police, around people running around with machine guns in the wilderness to protect their crops, around the proliferation of bad characters that came into the area, so the murderers, the serial killers, the human trafficking, those are the stories in my book that I experienced all of those personally. And without getting too deep into the weeds of that conversation, I've experienced like all the types of trauma when you categorize those out, right? And so it was a very strange upbringing, and we were essentially taken by the police at one point, removed from where we were at in the mountains. But 6 years old, I'm being taught how to capture and handle live rattlesnakes. Because that's the environment I lived in. Like we had beams lashed up in the trees where we'd sleep at night because there was rattlesnakes running around. There's no, when we're talking about living in the wilderness, there's not some campground that you go to that had a trailer at or wherever. It's like you hike into these areas. There's nobody around because we're trying to get away from everybody and hide from that. And we had nothing. I remember that same time. Well, that my mom was pregnant with my second sister, and she had to hike to a dirt gravel road when she went into labor, and then rode into town and in the back of a dump truck that finally came along. And I showed up at the emergency room. She climbed out of the back of the dump truck and went in and had my sister. But that was we had no resources. That's the way intense, that man. We lived. But there's a lot that I learned in the course of that life, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. I'd never put my kids through that at the same time. Right. So there's a balance. What can you teach, and how can you grow optimally with some of the right signals, right? The right level of resilience, but not so far that it pushes you to a point hey, you can still recover and be stronger from those events, but there's also a level of you fell so far down and created so much damage, that was unnecessary. That doesn't need to be there to get to optimize yourself, right?
Right, for sure. Well, that's an incredible story. I mean, if we're picking teams, I'm picking you pretty early, man. You mentioned something a moment ago about resilience being the essence of life, and alluding to if you break something, but it made me think of very early life when you're you have to overcome the inertia of gravity to get your head off the ground. You can't, without the resistance, the trees fall over. Without gravity, we don't stand up straight.
Yes.
You need something to push against.
Yeah. It is just fundamental if you think about it. And as human beings, that's my observation kind of growing up, is having the reflection of growing up the way that I did, which is, I took that and I took some power from it. A lot of people around me growing up, they're dead. They're in prison, or my brother's still living in the wilderness when he's not in prison down in Northern California. I went a different route. I ended up taking custody of my 3 younger sisters, raised all of them while I put myself through a dual engineering degree, working full time, went on to get my MBA and chase a career, and did, you mentioned world records, but I was a turnaround executive in the aerospace and automotive realms for a couple decades. That's what I did, just come in and fix and grow organizations. And so anyway, counter to the, because a lot of people automatically think, meathead. I'm a meathead. But but there's a few more layers there. But it gave me the perspective watching people early on. You see so many biological drivers that push us into that realm. And that was my experience, leading people.
Wait, into which realm are you referring to?
Into
just to like excel hard, or
to step into challenge, to step into things that you don't want to, right? So like you get to your teens and you're wanting to, push against your parents and get out on your own and forge your own path, but there's this mixture of like fear and anxiety with it, right? So it's this, you've got that twisting around, but the excitement, and that overpowers it. It's a biological driver. And then you've got the same thing. Maybe there's a hot number at a table, over the way in a bar, and you're like, I want to go over there and say hi, but I don't want to, right? And you end up doing it because there's some biological drivers. And then that goes another further. You're looking at bringing that as a partner into your life, and then having kids, right? All these things, like there's these drivers that push it. And then all of a sudden you see a lot of people get into their 30s and they just hit a plateau because outside of the biological drivers, we try to find the easiest route. We try to find comfort. And that's the other side of what I saw. Once you remove those, most people just get into a rut because you're trying to find the easiest realm. And when you're not engaged, you're not and people don't realize how unhappy they really get. And that's what I found in that leadership realm. Like I would challenge people. I would challenge people to do more than that they thought possible of themselves. And in those people that would bite on that and they would take that and be scared of it and follow through and realize it would be transformative. They would be fully re-engaged in their career. They'd be going back to school. They'd be like, all of a sudden you would see this just tremendous change. But I'd also get like 10 times the output out of, like, these would be like key people. And that's essentially how I did the turnaround stuff. Like you talk about strategies and all this other, I was an expert in certain types of philosophy around business management and lean manufacturing and all sorts of things. But it really just came down to change people, you change organizations. You like, it's really that simple.
Right. That makes sense.
And that was, I think my perspective growing up maybe allowed me to see that in different realms, to see that, like, I don't know if we're audio or video, but like
we're both.
One of the things on the wall behind me is the little picture of a few different sports teams that I've worked with. I've worked with nearly every major league sports team.
I see my team on there.
Yeah. If you've got a team or an athlete, I probably worked with them because I saw that same perspective when it comes to a lot of pain modalities. And there's so much out there, people just trying to manage and mitigate the risk and just come back from that. And like, how can we get better? What are the fundamental things that can drive us? And so I became an expert in a lot of biological mechanisms, biomechanical at first, because my degrees are in engineering.
Gotcha.
And that was my lens that I started looking at that stuff to begin with. And I started developing tools and education and things about how do we come back and how do you actually come back stronger from this? How can you learn from this both mentally as well as your movement patterns and, how you use your body to be better than you were before? I did a lot of that for selfish reasons up front too. I just wanted to be like
right,
the
I'm
best
sure.
athlete
And I
in the
know
world, so.
you probably, obviously you took your like physical training very serious probably for a very long time. And I think anybody that does that, it's never just a linear, smooth path. Like you're not going to work hard and be successful at it for a long time without bumps on the road. And it's important to like learn from the bumps to be better. I mean, I remember back in the day when I used to be an avid like runner and triathlete a lifetime ago. And I kept like rolling the same ankle like every year for like 5 years. And you'd get like runners get depressed when they can't run. I don't really run now, so I don't have
same thing happens if you're a lifter. Yeah.
Right. So, but I remember like getting angry, and then one year it like clicked, like, what's wrong with this ankle? Like, where's this instability? And it got me to like explore more deeply, like how to build more, single leg stability. So I'm not rolling my ankle, and like creating like a pivot point, turn a corner to build like what you're saying, like building resilience, I guess.
Yeah. And that's literally my story. It was like 15 years ago. I was known for being a pretty damn good lifter. I was one of the top lifters in the United States, and I went through a string of injuries and surgeries. And in the course of that, I'm like, I need to find the best person to work on me. And I kept looking and looking. I wasn't happy. I'm like, that's not right. That's not right. And finally, I bounced against this individual who ended up becoming a mentor of mine. And I wanted to know more. He introduced me to some really interesting theories around developmental kinesiology, and I started seeing the results. And then I had to do it with athletes that I worked with, because I was running an aerospace company at the time, but I owned a gym because I wanted to have the right environment, the right tools, the right methods. Like, if I'm going to be the best, I just created it. Like, if I'm after something, I just go deep.
I get that.
And so I'm like, I want to know more. And he's like, well, how about you take this course? And I'm like, all right. So I dove in. I took this course. Next thing you know, he's like, well, let me introduce you to this person. And so I'm forging these relationships with, like, the doctor that brought a whole form of developmental kinesiology into the United States. He introduces me to most of the instructors that teach it from Prague when they fly over. And then I'm, he's a good friend. And then I develop a great relationship. I actually just had a podcast with him the other day, Dr. Stuart McGill, leading spine biomechanist in the world. Like, all these guys. And then next thing you know, I'm like lecturing on, at colleges with these folks. Like, it was, but I ended up spending 10 years doing clinical continuing education in the realms of developmental kinesiology, neurology. Like, I just dove. I just had to know what the answers are. And that, it's not like I had some genius answers that all of a sudden I went and started working with all these teams. Like, it was a process of then taking my lens as an athlete and an engineer, looking at these concepts in different ways, and then going, hey, wait, there's gaps. There's gaps in the equipment that people are actually using in the strength training realm. There's gaps in the methodologies that they're using, because they're not listening to this skinny doctor because they think he has no credibility. I'm like, but those really, and so I started putting those into that realm, and then people started seeing the results. And then they listened to me, because at this point I was one of the strongest people in the world, right? And I was coaching people that were at that level or to that level. And so that created some momentum and really created some big shifts in that entire environment, which led to, like, what I did from a professional realm. I ended up then switching from that realm into the health and fitness realm full time about 10 years ago.
Gotcha. Well, talk a little bit about that, Chris. I mean, what are you doing? Like, when I prepare for this and I look at all the stuff that you find when you're looking up Chris Duffin, there's a lot there. Covers a lot of stuff, different product lines and coaching things. Like, what are you focused on now? What's the thing that, obviously, you're driven, and maybe it's born out of insecurities from, like, the early stuff.
Well, it's definitely that's worth a conversation. So I don't think we need. I don't really dance around that much anymore. But all right, I needed to be world class in athletics. I needed to be world class in business. I needed to outsmart come on, like, really. There's a certain level of, like, my upbringing and having the insecurities of being preyed upon for, human trafficking, and, like, we were less than human. Like, that was the part of my experience growing up, right?
This was a survival mechanism for you.
And it created, I think, without doubt, reflection, doing some inward look, like, there's maybe just a little bit of insecurities around why I needed to beat everybody at everything. Right. Let's be honest, right? Yeah. I can't say that all that came from a good spot.
No, but it's so healthy to be able to shine a light on that and self-reflect and just, like, understand it, to understand yourself more and be okay with it, not be, like, mad or resent that part of you, but be grateful for that part of you to be there when you needed it.
Grateful. But do I want my kids to be world class? No, because there's people, like, watch these series, like, watch Michael Jordan's series or wherever, and it's like, man, he's so driven, and it's like, you realize there is a certain level of mental health issues with anybody that performs at that level.
There has to be.
And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but it also, like, does that also lead to a normal balanced life? No, it doesn't. So do do I want my kids to be performing at that level in life? I'd like them to just be happy. Like,
Not
and
to
I
mention,
think that there's a balance somewhere in there that is not that.
Yeah, for sure. Not to mention, like, I can't imagine people like Michael Jordan, where everybody that contacts you, you might be second guessing what their motives are. Like, everybody's in awe of him, or what, at least during a big portion of his life. Like, how does somebody feel like they could connect with somebody with any authenticity? And maybe on the other person's side, like, how can you be authentic when you, like, if you're near someone that you admire to that level?
Yeah, and it's like, what are they hoping that they can leverage and get out of that, whether consciously, unconsciously? That has got to be a weird place to be, and I wouldn't want to be in that place. My performing at that level was in obscure areas of life, so I don't have that to deal with.
Yeah, they don't show like deadlifting on primetime ESPN very often.
No. So,
but it is quite respectable. Nonetheless, man, I understand. I own a gym and I've been teaching movement for a long time. I understand the hours, the depth of what you had to do to put up like numbers and perform at the level you did. I get it. I don't understand it to the extent because I've never flirted with that level, but I understand what must go in and how
it's a weird thing to reflect on, going, hey, if I were to do that again, and I'd think about it and be like, that's impossible. I couldn't do that. I couldn't walk through that process again. It's like, how do you get to that spot of being in that? I don't know. That's just a weird thing. Thinking back on some of the things that I did in the course of my training, and I'm like, that's not possible. But
well, how old are you now, Chris?
I am turning 49 here in just 2 months.
Okay, we're the same age. And how old were you when you were like peak level performance?
I did my 1,000-pound deadlift, I think at 39 or 40, right in that realm. And then I did my 1,000-pound squat for reps at 44. So I think 39 and 44.
For reps, did you just say?
Yes, yeah. So I did. I wanted to make sure that there's always criticisms on technique or this or that. And I'm like,
you wanted to compensate for that.
Yeah. So I didn't tell any. I was like, I'm training for 1,000-pound deadlift, and people are like, why don't you just do it? Like, you're strong enough. And then the day I went to do it, I did it for 3 reps because that was the plan all along. And then the 1,000-pound squat, I was saying, I want to do that. And by the time I think it got close to training, people realized that my goal was, so I had to fess up beforehand on that one because it was pretty obvious. So
those are insane numbers. And for the listeners, if you're not familiar with deadlifting or squatting, just trust us. Those are insane numbers. They don't really make sense. I remember hearing somebody talk about getting into really heavy lifts, and he said they never really get easy as they get heavier. You just get better at it. Like, you just get better at suffering through a 700 or 800 pound thing. It never, like, when you could move 1,000 pounds, it doesn't make 700 feel light.
No.
Where if you can move like
heavy.
200 pounds, 100 pounds feels light.
Yeah.
But that goes away.
Yeah. 700 pounds is still 700 pounds. Like, it still crushes you. And the 1,000 pounds, that is the weirdest thing to unrack it off the bar. Unrack the bar off the rack. And you're standing there and you're like, this weight just feels like it's just going to crush me, like come straight through my body. Like, I cannot do this. And it's just radiates through your body. But you know that you can, and you just start going through the motion. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, I'm squatting this. Like, it was just wild, because there was never a point where that's on my back and I'm like, okay, I feel like I've got this. Like, it was just a mind, F to go, all right, we're just going to start going down now.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's so hard to think about. But, I mean, it makes me think, like, strength, like some people think, and in the gym, I think of strength as like force and, transferring force through the body. But also, and as you get older, I get the vibe that you're looking at it in the other like categories of life of what strength or resilience means. Like I think about my mother. She raised 3 kids mostly on her own, working 3 jobs to do it. Like strength comes in a lot of forms.
The thing that I'm most proudest of, as far as my accomplishments, is the fact that I broke the cycle of trauma in my family's history. So it's still there and it's still live, in the rest of the family. But with me, it stopped with my kids. And if I spend some time thinking about that, that'll probably take me to tears. But that is the thing. It takes a lot of fortitude and strength to really do all the work to create that separation and live a life across that realm and have the mental and emotional resilience to build every piece of that, from the stable home, the environment, the influences of others, the influences on yourself. Like that's a hard thing to do. And I'm quite proud of that.
Well, that's beautiful, man. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, I mean, I had a troubled childhood too, as you know, at least half the people our generation did, because half the marriages ended in divorce. So, but I remember coming to the realization one day, like instead of being like resentful towards like my father and the way that he fathered, knowing now like he did what he could. You always do the best you could do with the tools and resources you have at the time. And he's, everybody's affected by their childhood and so forth. Like you talked about, it's a cycle. And I remember realizing that, oh, he's giving me a gift. He's showing me that what I want for my kid is the other side of that coin. He's showing me exactly what I want to do different for my kid. And the mindset shift of just seeing that way, where it was like being viewed through like gratitude and compassion towards him, completely changed my life, as opposed to being like burying resentment that he did this and he did that, when really it's like, oh, now I know what kind of father I want to be. Like, and I love the man. And it's such an important lesson. And I think more and more people are getting that lesson because conversations like this are starting to spread. But I really hope that becomes really understood more clearly on a like population level to help, all the millions of trauma cycles that are there. Because it's basically impossible not to screw up parenting.
You're going to, no matter what. Yeah. In some fashion or another.
So your kid's going to get traumatized to some degree. And from an observer, they might look like they really vary in degrees, and some might look worse. But to the person, to the child, it's kind of all the same to the nervous system. It doesn't really differentiate. The worst thing that happened to you is the worst thing that happened to you. And your body's going to like build responses and strategies out of that, or maybe belief systems.
But that's also where this conversation needs to play a role, right? Because you don't want to create an environment where they have not had any level of something to build resilience against. And we do see that this day and age with so many people creating these overly protective bubbles and, stepping in for every little thing to make sure. And what's going to happen when that person gets into the world? Because they haven't developed resilience. They haven't, there's a certain piece of one of the reasons I talked about my insecurities, but the other reason that I kept driving and pushing things wasn't just that. It was the fact that I had been through failure so many times in my life. I had to create my environment around me, from digging the trench to make sure my tent wasn't swamped and I did it wrong, and everything. And it's just you learn that didn't work, but I can figure it out. I can go another way. And you just keep tackling because you learn failure isn't failure. And that failing and actually overcoming it yourself without the helping hands of others, that builds resilience, and it builds confidence that you can tackle something when life comes at you and you're like, that sucks. I'll tell you what, we got sidetracked from this conversation here going, what are you doing today? So this company behind me it's not the company, but some of the, depends on how wide the frame is. You can see some of my patents on the wall. But that one that I worked with nearly everything. I mean, my equipment's in the White House. It's at every branch of the military, any high level performance, rehab, like clinical settings, like training facility, like everywhere. I lost that company. There was a hostile acquisition. I had, 3 investors that were billionaires, in-house legal counsel. People with money want things that they like, and doesn't really align with necessarily how I operate or my values. And there was a hostile acquisition. I was let go. They decided to do something else with the company.
Even though you started it. It was your thing.
I was founder. Yep.
That's got to burn.
And they took everything, renamed the company, packaged everything up, and moved across the United States, let go of the 50 employees that worked just down the way. And that was on a Monday morning. And Tuesday, I woke up and I was like, all right, this is the best thing that happened. And it takes a lot of failures to be able to open the lens where you don't send, I'm in this bad situation. These bad people did it to me. And it's like, let me think on this, because I certainly allowed that to happen, like in any number of ways, between bringing those people in, investors, what signals, like the only way that you can grow as an individual is to accept responsibility. No matter the event, you could blame it like, hey, this surgeon screwed up and did the surgery on the wrong leg. What could you have done different? Because there's no way you can change. The only way you can change and grow as an individual is to take that accountability and go, how can I figure out what piece or component of this I am responsible for, so that I can prevent or do better in the future? So you have to look at that in that perspective. And that's hard. It's hard because you just want to go, it's somewhere else.
And the alternative is being the victim and kind of handing over any power that you have to write a different script going forward.
Exactly. And we get into these little bubbles of like being afraid of losing everything that we have. And I think one of the opportunities that happens when things are stripped away, and it can be a mental exercise. I have people practice this at times when the fear is really limiting. I call it blinders, these fear blinders. The opening story of my book is about holding this rattlesnake at 6 years old, right? And it's a story about managing fear. Like, this rattlesnake is wrapped around my arm. I'd been taught, like I said, how to capture and handle them, because I was with my little brother. I was 6, he was 3. I heard it in a bush. I got it to strike, pinned it, picked it up, and then I was going to kill it so we could have some dinner that night and take the skin and, whenever we were in town next, sell it to the bootmaker. And so the rattlesnake's in my hands. I've got it pinched right in the right spot so that I have control. And looking in those beady eyes, they are beady. That snake just wants to strike and kill you. I mean, that's its sole intent. And you got fear coursing through your body. Absolutely. And if I let fear overpower me, I'm going to make a mistake in the steps that I know that I can walk through to be able to do what I need to do. If fear overpowers me, I am dead. But if I have no fear, if I'm reckless and unconcerned, I'm dead as well. Like, you need to make sure that you're listening to signals, but you've got to, there's lessons in how to manage fear. And so having that perspective of not letting it take control of you. And I see this in the environment all the time, where people lose, particularly like business owners or executives that have a lot of on their plate, like the company, the people, everything that's riding all the time. And you get into these kind of worrying about losing it, failing. And when you're super hyper focused on what can I do to not lose, and you're thinking about all the different pathways that you could, it creates these blinders, tunnel vision. You cannot see all the opportunities out there in front of you. It shuts down this creative aspect of your brain, which could allow you to be positioning yourself to be better based on where the market's shifting and going and all the opportunity. You have to respect and have, be cognizant of fear and have some risk management, but you've also got to take some moments and remove those blinders and see those opportunities, right?
What's an example of like a strategy to do that? Like the CEO that has the 17 things on their plate, fear of like screwing it all up.
So that is to just meditate into that. So instead of trying to shut down like, oh my God, what if I don't make payroll tomorrow? This, and this happen, and you're just so focused on the fear around that happening. Just go, that did happen. And I'm going to spend some serious time thinking about, all right, that happened. What am I going to do? The company closed, the whatever. So that's the exact example that I'm going to walk through here with myself, right? Except, it did happen. But I shifted so fast because I was in the practice of having done these exercises. But is to put yourself in that worst case scenario has happened. What do I do? What do I do if everything is stripped away from me and I start fresh again tomorrow with nothing? Because you'll realize, here's the trick is, you're realizing you're starting not with nothing. You're starting with yourself and everything that you've built as far as your resilience capacity, your knowledge, your skills, all these other things, and going like, all right, now here's the value of going, okay, if I had a clean slate, what do I really want to do? Where do I go? What are the next steps? And this can get you closer maybe to where your North Star or where you want to be in life has maybe shifted or changed a little bit in course. And you can go, man, if I had, this is the place that I would take that business because there's so many opportunities right here. You spend a week, days, whatever it is, like thinking about and mapping what that process is. This isn't a simple little like quick exercise. And map this out. Like, what is that? And now we can roll back to reality and going, oh, wait a minute. Not only do I have I can do so much if I was to start fresh today with who I am and what I'm capable of doing. Those are the steps. Wow, I have a whole lot to leverage. And I've got everything that I do have right now. I've got existing structure, organization, like I can, you know what? Now we're going to, and that is so powerful. So for me, like I had, that is why it's hard to give an elevator pitch. Chris, what are you involved with, right? So everything is around human resilience. And I started like, honestly, personally, like playing around with like peptides, like things of that over 20 years ago, back in 2003, because I wanted to be the best and I wanted to do it, drug free. So I was chasing all these other categories. I ended up getting into using anabolics, by the way, from 2010 to 2020 when I did my big feats, just to be full disclosure. Okay. Anybody that squats or deadlifts 1,000 pounds or even close to that tells you they don't. Like, there's a lot of people that are, if your profession is using your body, there's a higher disposition. Like, yeah, a lot of people do that. And in my sport, there's no testing. There's literally, you can compete in that. So it's, you're not cheating in any fashion or another.
They just want to see absolute numbers.
Yeah. And if you want to do the drug test, there's a whole drug tested division. Like,
okay.
Right.
So you have an option if you just want to compete against people.
So first I was chasing those, and I set all those records, right? But I started, and then when I started layering and building like what I did from equipment and all the other side, it was all with this same kind of scope. So I got to creating a bunch of equipment that was a way of tapping into our neurology. It was to tell the body that you are safe and to turn off some of the protective or restrictive mechanisms by getting the joints in the right positions. Change the load in space, change the peripheral inputs into the body, which changed the inputs into the brain. Then that became a top-down. It's going to get too sciencey. Won't spend a lot of time on that. But that is why so many adopted it, because you could take every single Major League Baseball team uses products that I created because it saved the shoulders and backs of their athletes. And they have in baseball, a lot of athletes coming in that don't have training experience. So you've got to teach them how to train. And so having a product that actually makes that happen. Well, those are signals. So I had that. So spine, number one global priority for mechanistically in the body is being able to control and manage spine position. Has the largest global impact. Number two is the foot and ankle. So I ended up I did 6 years of education around foot and ankle complex and strengthening that now the research is out there validating everything that I was saying, which is fantastic. But I ended up after 6 years, people going, well, what do I wear when I'm in the gym? Because I don't own my own gym. I can't go without shoes. Like, shoes are very valuable. Protect you from the environment, from disease, like useful things to have. We still need to use the foot just like every other part of the body. Like, there's no special science saying the foot is somehow different and doesn't operate on these principles around it needs things to adapt to. It needs to be able to use it or lose it. The said principle, specific adaptation to imposed demand, somehow doesn't apply to it, and we need to package it up and cast it and not use it. Like, I don't have to justify the science. Well, now the science actually shows this stuff.
The foot's a big deal. Like, it's a very complex mechanism.
Very complex. The engineering behind it is fascinating. We're not going to over-engineer the foot. It's a phenomenal device. I just did a video on like the windlass mechanism. I think it's probably way too long, probably 15, 20-minute video on that. I just put it on YouTube a couple weeks ago. I've got more coming on that. But that's why I created a shoe and boot company that allows the foot to get stronger, still has a touch of aesthetics because, I don't need it to be like birth control like every other minimalist shoe company out there.
Those are the ones I wear, the birth control.
Okay.
The ones people make fun of you for.
So check out mine sometime.
In my gym, when I work with a new person, I'm always like, we're going to train as close to barefoot as you're psychologically comfortable with. And I've got a lot of funny looks over the years for that.
You just need to use the foot. Like, there's nothing special. Like, it'll get stronger and it'll start working the way that it needs to. And anyway, so that's the number 2, global systems priority. So I have a company that does that, and I created a supplementation company that kind of facilitated some other methods. And the opportunity for me when all this happened is there was a lot that I was doing on cellular biology, cellular medicine, peptide therapies. And I had developed a lot of the protocols that are floating around today because I'd been working with them for so long and people knew that. And so I was working with some of the top athletes and privately and coaches and clinicians that would come to me because the clinicians would know the research, but they're like, practical, what is the actual
are peptides
dosage
generally
and protocol
accepted now? Like, if you're a professional athlete, you're able to use them?
That is the wild thing. So we can take people that just hurt themselves on the field and shoot them up with some cortisol and a number of other things that absolutely destroy their body and their mind and send them right back on the field at the same time. But a product like body protective compound that is created in our own gut and resides in our body, it's an amino acid chain. Like, it is not an exogenous drug chemical that's doing a reaction. It's literally just a signal to your body to do its normal processes of repair. Like, they can't use this. Like, that's banned. We could literally take somebody within a couple weeks and avoid surgeries and get them and I've got examples of it, like dual quad detachments of individuals where I've been able to talk about some of my clients, what they've been through, and I compare it to the clinical case studies of those exact things. And it's theoretically, it would appear impossible to accomplish what we've accomplished. Like, both quads being ripped off.
By using peptide therapy.
Yeah.
For the listeners.
Along with a combination of other things. So, it's a multi-pathway approach.
Gotcha.
Right? Stacking non-redundant pathways.
Can we pause for a second, Chris? Yeah. I want to hear all this, but I've played with some peptides over the years. I know they're real commonly discussed now. We've never mentioned them on this podcast. I don't think I've ever talked to them on the podcast. Okay. Can we just, for the listeners, peptides are basically in between blocks from raw amino acids on their way to making
quick
proteins.
History. So a lot of people think peptides were just invented. The first peptide that was produced was in 1926, I think, called insulin. Life-changing compound. That's a peptide. In the 60s, 70s, we started to get better at the synthesis of those. The 80s and 90s, that's when the cost of the synthesis really started going down, and so a lot more started being created. But it's an amino acid. A chain of those is a protein. That's a longer chain, right? That's all it is. A peptide is a short chain. 2 to 50 amino acids in sequence is a peptide.
And they're generally, the ones that people are using are generally ones that our body would naturally make endogenously. It's just you're either supporting or boosting the same pathway that they would be doing, potentiating their action.
Yes, and there's so many peptides.
It's a little
Yeah,
confusing when I look
it
out
is,
in the
and there's a
peptide
lot of
world now.
so a peptide is a drug like testosterone is going in and doing this reaction in your body. Growth hormone is going directly into the body, going to the liver, where I could take a certain peptide, which is more like a text message to a cell, is the best way to explain that.
Okay.
So the value also of a peptide over a drug, even though a peptide technically is a drug too, right? But is a peptide has a very low accumulation because it's a small size. I mentioned it's 2 to 50 amino. It's a really small protein. It's not a complete protein, basically. That's the best way to think
2
about
to
that.
50. Just for
2 to
context,
50.
like what's a typical protein? Do you know?
Oh, gosh. I need to...
You don't have to answer if you don't know.
Yeah. I don't have that offhand.
Okay. I ask a lot of questions. Are there
More
ways
than 50.
to measure?
It's more than 50.
Gotcha. Are there ways to, like, I know BPC, the one that you mentioned a moment ago, body protection compound, that's something our body makes to fix stuff
Yep.
on its own to
derived
repair.
in the gut. Yep.
Is there ways to measure if we make enough of that? Like, is there ways to know how much we already have, and that if we're supplementing, it's to get it to a physiological dose, or does that not even really matter? And the goal is you have an injury, you want to accelerate healing, and you want to kind of flood the area, the system with this repair molecule.
It's really hard to measure those because it's not necessarily blood serum levels and the time that they act in and how they act. Effectively, you can't do that. Right?
Okay.
And it's really, so let me finish the, testosterone and growth hormone. Those are prescription either anti-aging or, TRT, drugs. You can send a message to a cell so I could send a message to the pituitary, to the hypothalamus, and to the ghrelin receptor, and they tell that to release two different ways of releasing growth hormone. So your body is naturally releasing growth hormone. We didn't put growth hormone in it. We just sent a signal to the pituitary to do its job, and so we can do that. We could do something like that with a peptide to the testes. You can send a peptide structurally to the cell body protective compound. If you think about the cell as like this house that's either been damaged or needs to be built, body protective compound is like the foreman. So he's the site foreman that is telling the raw materials, the substrate, the workers where to go. Right? Your substrate is it could be the collagen if it's a tendon, right? It's the proteins, the structure to rebuild that cell. That's the foreman. The next one over that is TB500, or TB4. TB500 is the shorter analog that people generally use. That's like the architect. So it's doing the 3D structure of that cell. So it affects a protein called actin, which is in about 20% of all the cells that really creates the structural component of it. So it's creating the print that the foreman is following. Both of these also create what's called angiogenesis, which is the formation of new blood vessels in the area. So these microcapillaries, which this ties into, I want to call that out because we're going to talk about this in this non-redundant pathways, because you can stimulate things with certain types of exercise that release peptides. And a lot of people don't realize this, like that release cellular signals. We can also provide the raw materials. We can also enhance things called like vasodilation, which is the enlargement of those new capillaries that are formed via both exercise modalities, or different supplementation, or different other protocols like getting sunlight, things like this. So I want to build off of this because it's not all just peptides. There's a lot of stuff that's all just completely free if you understand the mechanisms. And so the next one that I like to add to that is called GHK-Cu. This one is bound to copper. It's and that starts declining in the body in your 30s, and so that affects the collagen and elastin. So that's like the face drooping and the joints getting.
Yeah, I'm seeing that stuff being put in like skin cream stuff.
Yeah,
like beauty
I was the
products.
first one to start using it as an injectable for healing, and now it's kind of in a lot of standard protocols. And they even, a product called the Glow, because it literally makes you look vibrant, and so it's really popular in the 50 plus female arena because
Gotcha.
it helps hair, skin, nails, like you just look better because those things decline. That's actually what's affecting that skin quality, the elastin under the skin,
Are
which
there
is
risks, Chris, to like interjecting at this level with these? Like you mentioned angiogenesis. Like if there are like in the context of cancer, is that like a problem, angiogenesis? Or
so the lack of studies here definitely has an effect. So some of the ones I'll talk about have human trials. They show high efficacy, but here's one of the things I mentioned early on. It's a small molecule that allows it to do two things. One, it allows it to penetrate into the cell, so it's very effective at doing this signaling job. Two, that provides low level of accumulation, so your toxicity is really low. Across the hall, peptides are really safe compared to a lot of other things because of that nature. The angiogenesis has been a concern if you have active cancer, right? So if you've got active cancer, that's something that you would want to discuss with your doctor around the use of peptides. But there's a lot of people that also use these in those profiles as well in fighting cancer. So it's unknown in that fashion. They do not propagate cancer. It's a fact. We get cancer high single digits a day. Let's say 7 to 9 times a day you get cancer.
really?
It's a natural part. Yes, it's a
That's
natural part of the
depressing.
and our body fights it off, right? That's we're meant to do that. It's just it's something that is a natural part of the process, and when we have an environment that can propagate that or propagate disease, that becomes a problem. And this is like an important discussion in peptides, and I want to get to that around aging and the impacts of the environment and the mitochondria or cellular level decline, because that is the driver of cardiovascular disease, metabolic disease, or the environment for cancer propagation. Like this is the world that we live in, where we don't get sunlight, we don't touch the ground, we don't get sunlight at the right times of day. We're not eating whole foods that are in season, not getting cold exposure. These basic things create degradation at that cellular level of the mitochondria function. It starts leaking. And as it leaks, because there's a breakdown in this cardiolipin, which is unique to the mitochondria, which is in every cell, that people often know for creating energy, but it does a whole lot more. But that mitochondria starts leaking. As that leaks, we're less efficient at creating energy. And then as we're less efficient, it also is enhancing the reactive oxygen species, so it starts creating more oxidative stress and burden in the body. So now that creates this cascade of things that starts happening, from heightened inflammation, again, and it starts driving. So you're aging faster if you're getting a high level of exposure to, let's say, EMFs, high level of exposure to LEDs and fluorescent lights, and not getting all the wavelengths of light. We're just like, put a plant in a closet or cover it with sunscreen, it's not going to grow as well. We have the same process works in our body, just not via chlorophyll, via the mitochondria. And so that breakdown starts happening. So we're talking about some things that repair some of that structure, which can be effective. Like, let's say we've had heart damage, like BPC and TB500 are well studied to improve the endothelial tissue and repair of heart tissue dramatically.
Really?
GHK, same thing.
Is that both through oral and injectable of them? Do you know?
It's usually injectable for that. Those are, and GHK, so you mentioned being topical, that is really widely used in that environment for topical skins and stuff like that. It works in that fashion too. These are all oral. The oral ones need to be special to be able to pass the pH of the gut. So you've got to make sure that you can't buy one of those that's just, and take it orally. And I really like to use that orally for people that have autoimmune or any sort of leakage or GI issues, because that affects it really affects the gut. And we would want to put a tripeptide in that, a KPV as well, which it works on the mucosal lining.
What's that?
And also,
KPV.
It's another peptide.
Does that stand for something, or do you know? You could say.
Yes, proline, valine, and I'm forgetting the first one, but it's just a simple 3 amino acid peptide that affects the mucosal linings, as well as it's a huge anti-inflammatory. So
that, along with BPC 157, you show helps people that have like gut issues?
Absolutely. So it helps repair that cross-linking in the gut so that we don't have leakage across that barrier. That leakage is then seeping in and then affecting the inflammatory pathways, which then affects what's happening in the mitochondria and the cell. Like, it's all this cascade. So I always start there first, and I see dramatic changes. It's so powerful, and more powerful than it should be, because the injectable is super efficacious. Like, if you don't have the GI issues, you would want to use the injectable because it works better. But in the case that you do have GI issues, that works better. My thought is
the oral works better because it's right there in the gut.
It's affecting the gut directly, but it has this huge impact on inflammation through the whole body when it's done that way. And I think it's just that impact on that vagus nerve, then affecting the brain, and then that additional cascade outwards. So if you've got those issues, 30 to 60 days of an oral is really, really valuable. If not, the injectable is the way to go. So GHK, so we talked about BPC being the foreman, TB 500 being the architect. GHK would be the master craftsman. So it's making sure that the materials are laid down correctly in the right direction. It's making better than it was before. Directly affects collagen and then like all of the white tissue. We mentioned skin and elastin.
If you do a round of these, let's say you're trying to heal from whether it's an intestinal thing or joint damage from your sport or hobby or accident, whatever, is the idea that you should only have to do it for a few months? I know they're not generally the cheapest of like supplements, I guess, if you look at that.
That's arguable. That's why I started. So I've been sourcing these for a long time to ensure the quality for myself.
So you sell these?
My clients, I do.
Okay.
And so I just started doing that, but I've been in this business for a long time, but I just went public this last year. That was part of the shift when this all happened to me. I'm like, oh my God, this opens the doors. So back to that conversation really quick. I'm like, because I had my investors and my board, they're like, you can't talk about this stuff. I'm like, but what we're doing here is one pathway into here. Like, this is how it all works together. But that's off the board. And I feel that I can have such a broader impact on quality of health, being able to talk about everything. Like, yeah, you need to move right in space. Let's talk about how to do that. Well, do we need BFR training? But peptides are another thing. Like, they're all tools. There's not one like thing that's going to fix but peptides are fascinating, and they're so available, and the cost that people are, out there is way out of board. So I brought that to market. I do all the quality testing because my background is manufacturing. I know how to manage lots, manage suppliers, do all the diligence. So I've got my COAs posted. You can see they're tested in third-party labs here in the USA. You can go straight to the lab site and verify that I sent those to them. Like, you can tie that to the lot on your vial. Like, it's great.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to get back to the question, but I forgot what the question was.
Are there any peptides that are like directly supportive to the metabolism inside the mitochondria, like as far as like driving glucose metabolism?
Yes,
they are.
And these, like, I don't want to state disease and you can fix it, but like the research is there, like they're being tested. So they're also being used because I talked about that. Let's put metabolism of the mitochondria in the brain is the big driver of neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer and Parkinson's, and the studies are in process for all this stuff right now too. So I'm going to talk about all those peptides that are being used to fix metabolic disease and neurodegenerative disease, which are actually the same class. One just got approved, so it's not like there's no BS. Like, it is used and got approved in September for the first neurodegenerative disease. But I didn't answer your last question, which was it was around safety, and then, gosh darn it.
Sorry, man. I cut you off and asked a bunch of stuff. I'm not the best.
It was You were asking a question, do you just run it once and you're done?
Right.
Yeah. One, peptides don't do a whole lot for people that are younger and good cellular health. Like if you're 20, 30, like don't worry about it unless you like tear a muscle off a bone or do something like you injured and it's not healing. Then you could look at doing that. You'd run a cycle, it'd be done. All this stuff starts declining with age. So anyone that's like 35, 40, 45 plus, like if you run a cycle of, let's say, that Glow blend or the Clo, which Clo is the addition of the KPV. So I talked about BPC, TB, GHK, so that's a blend called Glow. If you add KPV, which is the firefighter that says don't over-respond, it is make sure that the body doesn't overreact, and you're not going to be repairing the house if you got to fight the fire. And if it thinks there's a fire going on, that stops. So it's kind of your insurance, or anybody that's got high inflammation would be the addition to that one, Clo. Typically, someone that's 45 plus running a cycle of this, like once or twice a year, is going to be amazing. You're going to move backwards during that time as far as like your aging, joints, hair, skin, nails, like everything. Like you're going to feel better. You're going to have trouble getting sore from exercise. You're going to like it. It's going to be good. And doing that a couple times a year, you're going to find value because all that stuff has declined. And some of the pathways it's affecting are directly affecting what has declined with age. That's going to unwind that clock. If you combine that with one of those growth hormone releasing peptides that I talked about, because again, growth hormone starts declining as well, that's going to move you back like 15 years. That's going to be the people that you're going online that's a 50-year-old going, are they using, like they look amazing. Like you unwind the clock 10, 15 years from 50 and you've got the discipline and the work ethic and you've got your life structure, like you're going to have amazing results. You're going to go to the gym and not be sore, and like you're just going to build upon that. So that's a great. So you may and you could do it more frequently. There's a lot of anti-aging doctors that just prescribe those two items I just talked about year round. I still think that cycling is a good protocol. So if you like them and want to use them more,
if they're good, why do you recommend the cycling?
I recommend it's good practice because you're hitting receptors. And so taking time away from that is going to increase the receptor sensitivity.
Do you think that it desensitizes receptors and then you lose like endogenous production or use of these things?
You do not lose endogenous production of those things. I mean, they are declining naturally, but you could take those the growth hormone releasing ones. They've done studies to use them for 10 years and you stop, and because you're stimulating, it actually can repair production. So like if you've, like, let's say a lot of my folks, high level executives, high stress, they've been in the environment where that's been blunted because of the impact on adrenal fatigue, pituitary function's been reduced. We can run a cycle of this and it'll actually bring their natural back up because it's restorative, being able to send that pulses.
Interesting.
It's just, in my opinion, good practice in general. And what is, like, run it for 12 weeks, take 4 weeks off. Like, I think it's also going to make you, what I find is makes you appreciate when you take the time off and you're like, oh yeah, this is a good thing in life. Like, this is good. Now I remember what this is actually doing, instead of like, is this doing anything anymore?
So you don't
lose take some time off.
You don't lose
it's a nice
your
reminder.
Reference point.
Yeah, of your reference point, right?
Have you ever used VIP peptide, vasoactive intestinal peptide?
Yes. So I use that one in a lot of issues, like where a wound is open and not healing. I find that that's really a valuable one where, we've got something that you've been, an injury, it's been open, you've been working with docs, antibiotics, so on. Like, it can be really powerful. Great one is doing localized red light therapy with that as well. That's VIP is it's a really underutilized. A lot of people, that's a good, interesting one you asked about.
Well, I've been on it
people
recently.
Okay.
I did a run. My doctor recommended it. It's funny. My doc works with a lot of people with, I guess, like mold illness, Lyme, like just weird chronic illness that can't be figured out.
Yeah.
And I think
so that's another good application. So oftentimes you might be looking at something with like thymosin alpha or LL37. So that'd be.
I used those back in the day when I had Lyme disease too. Both of those.
Okay, that's why I brought it, because you said Lyme disease. I'm like, that would be the protocol.
Yeah, that was interesting. I hated the I had to inject in my gut, and that wasn't fun. I don't like that. Like, I just don't. I don't know what to say about it. I just don't like doing it. But I did it
Yeah.
because when you're sick, it's like you'll do anything to get better. Like you really appreciate your health when it gets taken from you. And like money and that like I'll take any supplement. It doesn't matter how bad it tastes or
Yeah.
inject. But now
Yeah, all of a sudden,
I feel
a
better.
couple
Like I don't want to
$100 a
just
month doesn't make a difference when it's like, this is affecting my life. Like, I can't. Like,
right. But the VIP peptide was interesting. I think my doc gives it out because it has something to do with not just direct, like within the intestinal tract supporting. I'm not exactly sure how it supports, but something about that, like pituitary or hypothalamus, like the connection where it resets some signaling after a bout of stress that I think is typically triggered from like environmental toxins or biotoxins like mold stuff.
yep. So it's used, in a lot of the mold toxicity. And that's where I mentioned like LO37 being an antimicrobial, thymosin alpha having an effect on the immune modulation. VIP affects the immune modulation as well. So there's a lot of really great pathways, and that's, I can see why.
So I didn't realize we were going to be talking about peptides today. Getting back to the mitochondria and supporting the like base level, like at the heart of all the ATP production kind of. Are there peptides that are directly related to supporting that process?
Yes. So this is where a lot of research is being done right now, and I've actually released an oral mitochondrial peptide right here. This one is SLUPP332 combined with another herbal, which is urolithin A,
Heard of that.
which is this is the only pharmaceutical grade combination of those, which is really fascinating. So, there's a couple interesting things to talk about there. We can talk about mitochondrial division dynamics. So that is a fancy way of like, how do we repair our cells naturally? So that happens via either a fusion process or a fission process, and then that's combined with senescence of the dead cells from there. So it's think of that as a three-legged stool. And yes, that's fission or fusion, like the nuclear reacting, but slightly different. So I want to explain it like a broken car. So if we go to the recycle yard and we've got one car that's got a good engine and another one that's a good transmission, they pull together and you create a working vehicle. So you've got two mitochondria with components that are matching, and they can replace the broken components with each other, and it creates a new mitochondria that is healthy, and it's larger.
So they fuse together directly.
They fuse together.
What do they do with the redundant parts that they don't need? Do they just get rid of
that? Is the fission process. So that is when now they pair off the bad parts and keep the good part, right? So that's a separate process that drives that. Both of those cause what we call biogenesis, which is the creation of new mitochondria. So if the energy demands are high, then we're driving those mitochondria to produce more and to kick up their own ATP production. As it rolls, this has a huge impact on the metabolic nature of things. So your type 2 diabetes, insulin resistance, all of that are greatly affected by that. And that's where a number of these studies are being done, is around the metabolic disease. And trust me, it has a tremendous impact on that. So it's going to have a leaning effect on the body. Your energy levels go up. We don't want to drive it like that all the time, though, right? So you need some time. So typically you would take those peptides on like your high energy days, like training exercise days. So that'd be a compound like MOTS-C, or as I mentioned, the SLUPP332.
So the SLUPP, what? PP3?
2, yep. We just call it SLU for short in the industry.
Okay, so
SLU.
how does SLU, do you know the mechanism of how SLU I guess, upregulates that fusion and fission process, or the which together you say is the biogenesis, the making new, more, I guess, robust mitochondria of some sort, like healthier mitochondria. Do you know how those dots get connected?
So that is just the signal that is being sent to the cell with that. So the SLU, for example, is highly targeted because it affects all three of the ERR receptors in the body. So there's three of those. Often people misconstrue that as going, well, that's going to affect because they're estrogen receptors, but it's not affecting estrogen at all. Different pathway, but it affects the cells, and the value of that is it's affecting every cell in the body. So it makes SLU, which is why I love this one, highly targetable because it's actually reaching cells that are normally hard to touch, like kidneys, liver, eyes.
And that's because there's like systemic messaging, like a hormone, or
Because those receptors are in every cell of the body is why.
Gotcha.
So it opens up. It's like a key. It's like an unlock. So if you're working those some modalities, via let's say pharmaceutical interventions or lifestyle or herbal that are targeting those specific tissue, it's going to ramp up the improvement in those. So it's a really great combination. MOTS-c is used in clinical trials on kidney function as well, because again, some of these same effects. So it's really, really fascinating around that. So you'll feel it when you start taking these, because like literally your endurance just starts like going up, your ability to, and that's because it's improving that ATP production, and oftentimes switching that to what we call oxidative phosphorylation over glycolysis, which we're producing 2 ATP for within that glycolysis, where we're creating 32 to 36 ATP via oxidative phosphorylation. So you're creating a lot more energy with the same resources. And that is, most people kind of start getting stuck in that latter reaction, particularly if we've got inflammation or metabolic issues that are going on. So yeah, all of a sudden, like, you start taking those and it's like, I'm not getting, you won't get sore from exercise. Your capacity to do work is going to go up dramatically. You typically want to do those earlier part of the day because of that ramping effect. It's going to interfere with sleep if you take it later in the day, particularly like MOTS-c. And we want to limit the cycles to like 8 to 12 weeks, because you will start, if you're driving that hard, you'll hit a point where, hey, at the end of the day, now I'm feeling fatigued. Like, because it's like you don't want to overdrive that mitochondria all the time. So it's really important that we cycle those. Another one, this one just got...
How does somebody know if they are? Just, would you get
that feeling?
That feeling.
So you would get that feeling. You would start seeing like your HRV levels start to decline. Maybe feeling like a little tired or fatigued in the eyes towards the end of the day. Those sorts are all signals. But
so it's
HRV,
basically stepping on the gas,
rate,
which a lot of people could use a little bit of gas, but you could get too much gas.
Exactly. And so in that sense too, it's important to talk about SS31, particularly with aging folks, because stepping on the gas, that's exactly it. It's like taking your car to the tuner with the same exact hardware. All of a sudden it's performing at a new level. You just did a software update on your computer. Boom, it's screaming. But if that hard drive's making noise, or the rod's knocking on your engine and it's kicking a little blue smoke, you probably don't want to do the tune, right? Because you might wear out a little bit faster, right? So SS31 affects the hardware. It's really unique. So it is this one is electrostatically charged, opposite of what cardiolipin is. And cardiolipin is unique to the mitochondrial cell, and that is creating that structure and really improves as we repair that shuts down. That's where I mentioned earlier, starts breaking down, and then we're getting the leakage and the extra reactive oxygen species and the oxidative stress, right? So if I've got somebody, so typically my folks, a lot of people promote like, you need to run MOTS-c and then use SS31 to clean up the damage. SS31 is by the one that just got approved by the FDA. for neurodegenerative diseases, which we're going to get into, because that is a discussion
like
around
Parkinson's and Alzheimer's.
Yep. So the a lot of people recommend running MOTS-C. It's pointless to run SS31 because it's not improving anything. For me, I go the other way around because most of the people are high performers that come to me. Like they're high performers later in life and they're starting to feel they've had the decline they've been pushing too hard, like all the lifestyle things I just talked about. You can think of a high performance, probably not eating well, maybe some alcohol. Like sure, they've been training, but now all of a sudden they just can't keep up. Like things are falling flat. They know that they're aging, but like they've got brain fog. Is it more than it should be? I'm gonna usually, well, we'll always run blood work, but subjective indicators in that case scenario I just tell me that we've probably got some breakdown. And then we run blood work, we probably see some elevated insulin resistance, A1C, combined with a few other factors that paint this picture of like, yeah, we've got some breakdown in that cellular function. I would start with SS31, run that. That way we're repairing the cell before administering the MOTS-C, right? So just knowing, simple, do I need the mechanic first or do I need the programmer first?
And all these are things that our body naturally makes.
SS31 is not so that is not one that's normally out there. It was specifically designed to do that function.
And this repairs what part of the machinery?
Cardiolipin. That is,
and that's like what gives the mitochondria integrity to keep stuff from leaking out that shouldn't leak out?
Exactly.
Okay. This is
and that's why that is used in the neurodegenerative disease, because when we dive into the neurodegenerative disease, most of that they've found is a breakdown of the mitochondria to produce energy in the brain. So you start starving the brain of energy. That is a driver for a lot of these pathways. So they're like the amyloid plaque stuff, like people that are still on that, like and chasing the research, like the research doesn't support that. Like this is the path, and this is where a lot of research is being done right now. And it's only a kind of a rare neurodegenerative disease that it was first approved at. That's usually how that starts, and then it'll expand. But repairing that structure in that brain, and anecdotally, there's people that, your doc or others out there that know this stuff that are using these in these case scenarios, and we know what the feedback from those is without doing some of those, clinical trials, right? Because there's not somebody supporting that necessarily in that environment. So yeah, that's really fascinating is the impact, because we're turning back the cellular age, and that cellular age that's probably aged too much because of these stressors of, micro, whatever you want to
all have, the crap in our environment,
all the crap in our environment, and the lifestyle of this high stress, high technology world that we live in. Microplastics, lights, like all that stuff, like that is degrading, and it builds up, and then add in high stress, poor food quality. Like these are all drivers. I mentioned Whole Foods a few times. Like that is a driver of your mitochondria. It is a driver misunderstood a lot of times, like that it tells our body what season it is, and our mitochondria produce light during the winter. One of the reasons the signal is cold. Well, if you're not getting cold exposure, like it's okay if it's cold. Hey, I'm going to have my jacket off for a little bit. Like food is another way of doing that. And that particularly also works because half people have a genetic, maybe it's not half, but if you've got a genetic halotype from the equator, you're not going to get those signals from some of those normal methods if you're living in that higher latitudes to do that shift. And now you're not getting those signals. So that's, specifically like African-American populations that live in Chicago and Canada have massively higher incidences of cardiovascular disease, diabetes, and cancer. Like, that's because they're not getting those signals, because that genetic halotype that passes down through the mother side is there, and they're not switching during the winter time to produce their own light internally.
Wait, so you're saying in winter our mitochondria make light?
Yes.
In what form? Like what wavelength? Or is that like
it's
visible
infrared?
Light? Infrared. We make.
No.
Oh, so that's how we're making body heat. That's like infrared. Okay.
Yeah, infrared. So that was discovered in the 60s.
But only in the winter, or all the time, but just more in the winter?
It's more,
Gotcha.
yeah. Yeah, and that's literally how, like, night vision, works. Like, these concepts have been around, and, like, there's no arguing this. Like, if you do deep, this stuff is well understood. I'm not, it might sound, if you haven't heard it, woo-woo at first, but that's the foundation of, like, and I'm not a big proponent of, like, cold plunge. I think a lot of people overuse that, and it actually can cause some negative issues if you're already, like, heightened and on the overside. And
yeah, I'm not a believer. I don't buy it.
That's the people driven to that. What I'm talking about is just cold exposure, so your body knows it's wintertime, just like the Huberman get some light in the morning and in the evening, so your body knows it affects your circadian rhythm.
What I try to do.
Like, that's all I'm saying. I'm not going, you need to do cold plunge. Like, overusing cold plunge does some negative things because it's affecting the nervous system. Anyway,
you're driving stress.
You're driving stress.
You're
exactly.
giving yourself chronic stress.
And who are the people that are typically driven to use that? Like, they're the people that are on that edge anyway. And yeah, it feels good at first, but then it might end up not, right? It's just like we talked about, you need to cycle off the mott seat. Like, body works in rhythms. Like, you can't drive and make something necessarily better.
Part of me is scared of some of the peptides because I feel like I'm trying to outsmart the inner wisdom. And part of me feels like,
and you shouldn't. So that's the whole, and that's how I try to use those. So a lot of, like, the growth hormone pulsing, we do at specific times. We might pair with, like, epithalon, particularly if somebody's, like, changing time zones via. So you get wrecked when things like that happen. So we can reset that. We can reset that circadian clock. And a lot of these overstressed, that drives a breakdown in that. So it's real simple things that you can do with that, with, like, your TRT, because all your hormonal pulsing needs to be at certain times your body's naturally supposed to. So all I'm trying to do, that's why I said, I'm not going to use peptides on somebody that's 20 to 35 or that's in good health. Like, all I'm trying to do is use them as a mechanism to reset the clock, which we could do without that, but maybe we don't want to spend 10 years, like, in that process. So it's a shortcut to get us back. It can't get us better, and you need to be intelligent about it. But man, it sure does. For me, I'm 49. I feel better than I did in my 30s.
Well, is there any peptide that is specifically useful to support, like, sleeping better, like sleeping through the night, not getting up in the middle of the night? Asking for a friend.
Yeah. So I really like to do a circadian reset when that's happened. So epithalon for a 10-day cycle, usually twice a year, can really keep you on.
Is that what you said?
Yeah. So, which, if you look that up, it's going to say it's an anti-aging. It affects the telomere length, so it improves the DNA strands from unraveling. But an often unknown effect of that is it has a huge impact on the circadian rhythm, and that's how I would use it. So I like to run a 10-day course of that twice a year. Time change works well because then you just don't even really feel that time change.
So do you take it at night for bed, or do you?
Yep. At night for bed for 10 days. You can run low. The typical protocol is lower dose for longer periods of time, but that's the approach I like to use.
Do you know how it does that? Like, how it helps you stay asleep?
It's sending a signal. So you have a circadian clock in every cell. So it's sending the signal to that clock that is in the cell.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's like telling your body that it's nighttime.
Yeah. Yep. So that's one pathway. Another pathway is the growth hormone. So we have a natural growth hormone pulse in the evening. So if we take those growth hormone releasing peptides in the evening, my favorite is ipamorelin and CJC 1295 without DAC, because that's a shorter length. It's not been bonded with the DAC to make it last longer, which that's what people normally recommend, because we want a pulse aligned with our natural rhythm to affect the circadian rhythm, versus just thinking about maximizing our growth hormone output, like, for days, right? So we do that. That really improves quality of sleep. If you look into growth hormone releasing peptides, a lot of people the clinically approved one is tesmorelin. CJC 1295 has the same exact effects of it, but it's a tenth the cost, and tesmorelin has more of an effect of potentially ramping the sympathetic nervous system, which has an opposite effect to sleep than you would want.
Boy, this is all a little confusing. There's so many. There's a whole alphabet here. Lots of letters.
There is a whole. So anyway, I sell those as a combination. IPAM Memorial and CJC 1295. So you just take the one. 5 nights a week before bed. That way you're.
So you sell all this stuff. Do you offer like consultation? Like, do you help people walk through how to approach these?
I do. So I do one-off consults, and then I do coaching, and the coaching is with a team. So what I do for coaching is really unique. It's kind of based off of my background, but it's...
You mean you hand everybody a rattlesnake and throw them in the woods?
Exactly. How'd you know? Kind of, sort of. There's people that love to chase biohacking, and I want to take this, and this, and this, and it's going to make me amazing. Guess what? That's not... If you're not training, like, number one biohack in the world, pick up some weights and move it. And if you're not moving it well, you work in the movement realm, like that is a problem. I could try injecting all the stuff I want in my shoulder, but if I'm moving like crap or I'm overloading my training, I can't fix it. So I need to have an input on training. What you're doing in training, like how you're pushing that, should be aligned with what you're trying to optimize to. Like, what phase are we in? When is your vacation? When is the high stress things with your work and others that we're trying to build your training and your peptide cycles around to optimize? Like, they're concerts. And then the other thing we're talking about, mind. Why do you need the interventions? Right? In the first place, what got you to where you're at? What's holding you back from achieving your full potential? So I've got a 3-year curriculum that's really kind of built for high-performing individuals that is focused on the intrapersonal, interpersonal, and extrapersonal. So this is leadership development. It's the inward look on understanding your values. It's non-linear based on where the person's at in life and the work that they're doing in their business, their life, so on. So I think, and I've only, like, this is something that you should be attacking all of this. And I want people to be able, and I know what high performance individuals have in their life, and being able to remove things from their plate. So the peptide stuff is delivered straight in the calendar on an app that goes, hey, at this time, take this. Boom. We build all this out. We run your blood work. We've got a clinical partner if we need to do any pharmaceutical interventions. One of my coaches is a fellow with the William Seeds Institute, which is the #1 certifying body for physicians to do peptide therapy interventions. And I've got a strength coach who was my head of strength and development. My last company, we had a team of over a dozen coaches that worked with people around the globe, did seminars, certified people in movement systems, and
this is a very essentially
it's world. We've got world-class strength training. We've got world-class, like you said, the cellular medicine on hand, and then I'm heading up the leadership and personal development and personal mastery. And so it's a really unique program. Nobody's doing what we're doing, but I think that's what I have to offer. So
sounds like you really find something you like to do, man. You seem very passionate about it.
I am very passionate about it. Well, I get to change people's lives for a living. Like, that's... or help them change their life. I mean, at the end of the day, I'm not doing it.
It's very rewarding. Yeah, I mean, in my
it
experience
is incredibly
in
rewarding.
the gym, I've always really enjoyed being at that like pivot point for someone where they kind of turn a corner and not like, and just to like put the step there for them and then watch them see what unfolds. There's something about it that's just very rewarding. Hits me.
It is. Yeah.
That's a lot. You know, I didn't expect to get so deep into the peptides, and it was very interesting and honestly a little confusing for me. I feel like I would need like a slower, more step-by-step process to learn those more deeply. I understand it's a whole new world that's, even though it's been around, it's emerging very fast.
I have a
now.
free forum where I've got articles and discussion. Anybody can join it. If you go to my site, chrisduffin.com or enhancedexecutive.com, click on community at the top, join for free. I'm starting to produce a series of videos on YouTube where I do deep dives on this and cover the research. So it's not just me talking, but I'm polling and analyzing the research so you can see what's out there. That's all for free. Just trying to drop that out there for folks.
Well,
join.
That's great. And Chris, I appreciate you reaching out. I've really enjoyed talking to you. And I think your story as a kid, it's remarkable. And I think it's very inspiring that you've kind of pulled from all these experiences and obviously trying to make the world a better place. So I appreciate you being out there doing that. And for the listeners, always grateful for your listening. And, if you have comments about this, I'm interested, especially if you have tried one of these peptides that Chris mentioned and you have an experience. I would love to hear some personal experience about it. I find it very intriguing and would like to learn more over the next, months, years, whatever. So appreciate that. And for people to learn more, they go to chrisduffin.com. And there was another site you mentioned too?
Chris Duffin is going to redirect to the Enhanced Executive. Okay. That's my new site.
And I know you're big on Instagram also.
I think. Yep. Okay. You can just look for Mad Scientist Duffin anywhere, or type in Chris Duffin in most anything. You'll pop up. Usually there's a underscore between the Mad Scientist and Duffin. Okay. But you can find me.
Great.
Mostly I'm on YouTube. I kind of haven't been on social the last bit. So.
Good for you.
Yeah. I'm switching. Stuff needs context and nuance, and I'm just kind of tired of trying to do soundbite catchy stuff.
Understandable. Well, I appreciate even though it was without your knowledge, I appreciate the extra inspiration during my workout this morning before this, just knowing I was going to sit down with you.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that, man.
All right, everyone. Hope you enjoyed. Have a good day.